So how does OAuth 2 work? Let me show you using Google as an example. So on the left side, you have your app. The app will redirect the user to the resource owner page. And this will be, in our Google example, the page that says, hey, this app wants to access your email address, your Google Drive data, whatever. And once the user accepts it, it will send back a grant token to our application. And then we can use that grant token on the Google Auth server to get back our real tokens. And there's going to be the access token and a refresh token. Then we can use the access token to make calls to the resource server. So the resource server could be Gmail, Notion, Twitter, Discord, whatever. And this resource server is going to check with the auth server if the access token is valid. And if it's valid, it's going to give us back the requested resource. But the refresh token only has a certain time to live. So it will expire after a couple of minutes to a couple of hours. And then we're going to use the refresh token to generate a new access token so we can continue to have access to our resource server. If you have enjoyed the video so far, please drop a like, subscribe, and show the video to your pet turtle Peter so he can learn about OAuth as well. Okay, now let's jump into our editor and set up OAuth 2 with Google. I'm going to show it here using JavaScript and Hono, but the same principles apply for other server frameworks as well, like Express, Fastify, Elysia, and also if you're using another language, the core principles are going to be the same. So to get started, we need our client ID and the client secret. And to get that, we have to jump into our Google Cloud Console and let's create a new project. Now we have to install all the APIs that we want to use. So for this example, let's use the Calendar API. So once that's done, we have to go to our OAuth consent screen and set up the consent screen for the app. Okay, let's create it. Put our email as a support email. Next, we have to add the scopes, and the scopes are what our app will have access to. So for example, we could get the email address, the profile. Let's search for the Calendar API and let's get the auth calendar read only. So we can read the calendar events of our user. Add ourselves as a test user. And that's done. Next, we have to generate the credentials. So we have to click Credentials, make it a web application. Let's add our authorized origin. So this is from where our app is allowed to make requests. So for this case, it's just going to be localhost 3000. But if you go to production, that would be your production endpoint. And the redirect URI. And now it's going to give us our client ID and our client secret. So let's put that into the env file. That's everything that we need from the Google Cloud. Let's jump back into our editor and start coding. We put our client ID and the secret into our env file. Then we have to install the Google APIs package, create a new client that's using the ID, the secret, and our redirect URL. So in this case, it's going to be auth callback Google. And then we also have to define the scopes that we want to request access to. In our case, it's going to be email, profile, and the calendar read only. Then I've created a very basic HTML. It has a button, and that button is a link to the /auth endpoint. So if we start it and check it out, this is how it looks like. And this endpoint is not implemented yet. So let's start there. First, we have to create this state, and what this is going to do is going to link our auth to our callback. With this, we can prevent certain attacks, specifically the cross-site request forgery attack. Let's just set that to a random UUID. And obviously, in like the real world, you're going to put that into a cache or a database and map that somehow to the user, so you know who's making the request. Next, we have to generate our redirect URL. So let's create that, and that's going to be client generate auth URL, and we got to pass in a couple of things. So first, we can pass in the state. Then we have to pass in the scopes. Then we have to define our access type. This can be either online or offline. And if we choose online, which is the default, it only is going to give us back our access token, but not the refresh token. So once this token expires, we don't have access to the resources anymore. So we're going to set it to offline. And that's it. And then at the end, we have to redirect to this. Let's try it out. Log in with Google. And as we can see, we can log in with one of our with one of our emails. So it says Google hasn't verified this app. That's because we haven't verified it, but we can click continue. It asks us if we want to sign into it. And then we can select that we also want to have access to the Google Calendar. And then if we continue, it's going to go back, as we can see here, to the auth callback Google endpoint. And that's not implemented, so let's do that next. And we're going to get access to a couple of things inside the request query. Let's access them here. So first there's going to be an error, if there was any error. Then there's our state, and then there's our code. If there was an error, we're just going to send the text. Obviously, in a real world application, you're going to handle that somehow. Next, we can say if our state, and let's rename it here to request state. If our state, so this is the state that we generated when we started the authentication flow, doesn't match the state that our request sends us, we know there was something fishy happened. So let's just return a text that says state don't match. And then last, let's use our code that we get to generate our access token and the refresh token from the Google Auth server. This is going to be client.getToken. It's going to take in our code and it's going to return tokens. So our access token is going to be token access token undefined, and our refresh token is going to be tokens.refresh tokens. Okay, now that we have our access token and the refresh token, we can set them into our clients, set credentials, and we can just set the tokens. And now our client is authenticated. So now we can use our authenticated client to make requests to the calendar API. And then we can say calendar events list, and the auth gonna be our authenticated client. And then just log them out and redirect back to our main page. Let's try the full flow. Oh, okay, so we have to give our calendar ID primary. Let's try it out again. Now we can see the request worked, and we're getting all my calendar objects. That's it. But obviously we wouldn't want to use this inside the callback function, so we would probably create like a new thing, and there we could do all of that async, and instead of the tokens we would use access token. Let's return the events. And as I said before, you would want to save these tokens inside the database or something, and then get the appropriate token for the user that calls this function. But for us, for now, that should work. So let's try it out again. Okay, and now we should be able to call the calendar endpoint, and as we see, we get access to the calendar events with all our items in here. So now that you're an expert in OAuth 2.0, you can build your next $1 million app. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments, and see you next time.